They say the last week before a deadline either makes you or breaks you. For me, it did both. I was 7 days away from submitting my senior thesis, a project I had poured my entire soul into for months. My professors had warned us about this week, calling it the final stretch, but no one had prepared me for what would really test me. It wasn't the writing. It wasn't the editing. It wasn't even the exhaustion. It was my own family. Let me backtrack a little. My name's Aisha. I'm 21, a final year student at a public university, majoring in sociology. My dream? To land a scholarship to a graduate program abroad somewhere far from home, where I could finally breathe, where I could finally be me without being overshadowed. That thesis? It was my ticket out. I had worked on it for over 5 months. Countless books, interviews, field notes, data collection. It was all there, saved neatly in folders, spreadsheets, citations I had triple-checked. My laptop was basically my second brain. I slept next to it like it was a stuffed animal. It was always warm on my lap, always open, always blinking back at me with chapters waiting to be completed. Every night I worked until my vision blurred and the cursor danced on its own. But it was worth it because I was close. So close. Now let me tell you about my home. Imagine a house where attention works like a spotlight, but it only ever lands on one person. That person is my younger brother Jake, 19 years old, recently dropped out of college. Loud, reckless, and in the eyes of my parents, somehow still flawless. He had this dream of becoming a famous streamer. He converted his bedroom into some kind of gamer cave. Neon lights, a giant microphone, multiple monitors, the works. Every night was a chaotic concert of yelling, gunfire, sound effects, and laughter that echoed through the walls like a rave. And I was just the quiet one, the one who didn't cause problems. The one who stayed invisible unless something went wrong. My parents, well, they loved him loudly, constantly asking how many followers he had now, applauding his entrepreneurial spirit. Even when he failed a class, it was, he's just figuring himself out. But when I got a 3.9 GPA instead of a perfect 4.0, you need to focus harder. I had learned to live in the shadows. But that didn't mean I didn't burn. The night it happened was a Thursday, exactly 7 days before my thesis was due. I remember it clearly, because I had just finished rewriting the entire conclusion section. It had taken me 3 days, and I was finally happy with it. I closed my eyes for a second, just to enjoy the moment. Then there was a knock at my door. Jake walked in without waiting for an answer like always. He had his phone in one hand, a cocky grin on his face, and this casual air like the whole world owed him something. "Hey, I need your laptop for a sec," he said. I didn't even turn around. I was still staring at the screen, reading my last line again. "No," I said calmly. "I'm working," he scoffed. "Just real quick." I turned then, looked him straight in the eyes. I said, "No, Jake. I'm literally in the middle of finishing my thesis. It's due in a week." He tilted his head like I'd said something ridiculous. "Geez, you're always so dramatic. It's just a laptop." That's when I stood up. I didn't yell. I didn't curse. I just closed the laptop slowly and placed it gently on the table, like it was something sacred. Because it was, Jake. I said, "Do not touch my stuff. I mean it." And then he smiled. This smug, childish smirk, the kind that always got him out of trouble. "You need to relax." Then, before I could stop him, he stepped forward, grabbed the laptop and slammed it onto the floor. It hit with a sound that I swear I can still hear sometimes when I'm trying to fall asleep. Plastic cracked. The screen bent. I stood frozen, watching it break apart like a glass heart. For a moment, everything was silent. Then he looked at me and said, "Oops." I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. I just stared at the fragments on the floor. Every word I had written, every ounce of my future shattered before me. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just stood there, my fists clenched so tightly, my nails dug into my palms. And then, as if summoned by chaos itself, my parents walked in. "What's going on?" Mum asked. Jake stepped back, almost proud of himself. My dad looked at the broken laptop, then at me. I waited for their reaction. I expected shock, anger, at least a little bit of concern. Instead, they laughed. Double quotes. "Oh, Jake," my mom said. "What did you do this time?" Dad shook his head, chuckling. "That thing's been running nonstop for months. Maybe it needed a break." My mouth dropped open. I thought I was hallucinating. Are you serious?" I asked them. My entire thesis was on that laptop. Everything. I didn't even have time to back it up yet. Jake shrugged. "You should have saved it somewhere else." "Not my fault." I looked at my parents again. My voice cracked. "Do you even care?" My mom gave me this tight-lipped smile. "You're always so emotional, Aisha. It's just a laptop. You can redo it. Just a laptop. Just 5 months of work. Just sleepless nights. Just my future." I turned and walked out of the room. My hands were shaking. My heart was pounding. But my mind was already making a decision. That was the moment everything changed. Not because I lost my thesis, but because I finally saw them for who they really were. And I decided, if they could laugh at my pain, then I would make sure they remembered the sound of my silence. Forever. Asterisk. I didn't leave my room for the rest of that night. I just sat on the floor, staring at the broken pieces of what used to be my lifeline. The screen was cracked down the middle like a spiderweb. The keyboard had popped loose at one edge, and a few keys had scattered under the desk like they were running from the disaster. Picked up one of the keys, -BACKSPA. The irony didn't escape me. If only I could backspace my entire family. My mind was racing, but my body felt numb. I knew I had no time to waste. My thesis was due in exactly 6 days and 11 hours. But all I could do was sit there, swallowed in silence, as the weight of helplessness settled on my chest. I tried to power it on. Nothing. Of course, not. It wasn't just the laptop. It was the backup drive that I had kept in the same bag, which Jake had knocked off the table too. It had hit the wall so hard, the USB connector was bent in half. My work existed nowhere else. No cloud, no flash drive. I had meant to back it up again that weekend, but there was no weekend now. I was cornered. At breakfast the next morning. No one mentioned the laptop. Not even once. Jake sat at the table shoveling cereal into his mouth, earbuds in, laughing at something on his phone. My dad was scrolling through news articles. My mom was humming while making tea. I sat there in disbelief. No one even apologized. "Mum," I said finally, my voice strained, "do we still have that old laptop from before? The grey one?" She barely looked up. "Oh, the one with the battery problem. It's somewhere in the cabinet. But it's really slow. I didn't have a choice." I said thank you and stood up. Jake chuckled. "Guess you'll finally learn to back things up, huh?" I didn't reply. Not because I didn't have anything to say, but because I knew if I opened my mouth, I might say something I'd regret, or worse, something I wouldn't. I found the old laptop buried under some tablecloths in the kitchen storage. It was dusty and smelled faintly of mildew. When I opened it, the screen flickered like it was surprised to be alive. It took 5 whole minutes just to load the login screen. This was my new battlefield. I plugged it in, set up a blank Word document, and stared at it like it was a mountain. I had to climb all over again. That day I rewrote the introduction. Slowly. Painfully. The lag was unbearable. Sometimes the keys would stick, and I'd have to restart the whole system just to delete a typo. But I kept going, because I had no other option. That night, I skipped dinner. No one noticed. While Jake screamed at his monitor in the next room, I sat with my fingers trembling over the keyboard, trying to reconstruct paragraphs from memory. I drank cold tea and fought sleep with music in one earbud. It felt like drowning in molasses, but even as I typed, there was a voice in the back of my head, whispering, "They didn't care. They didn't care when it broke. They didn't care when you cried. They still don't care." I kept hearing it every time Jake laughed, every time my mom praised his tech skills, every time my dad asked him how many followers he had now. That voice grew louder. It twisted something inside me. Until I didn't just want to finish my thesis. I wanted revenge. Not the kind with screaming matches or smashed phones. No. I wanted something clean. Something calculated. Something that would leave a mark deeper than broken plastic. So while I rewrote my thesis by day, I started planning something else by night. It started with little things. I watched Jake more carefully, not as a sister but as an opponent. I started keeping track of when he live streamed, when he left his door unlocked, what apps he used, what tabs he forgot to close. I noticed patterns. He was careless. He used the same weak password for everything. He left his streaming setup unattended when he went to the bathroom. He liked to brag in his videos, but sometimes he bragged about things he probably shouldn't have. I wasn't tech savvy, not like him. But I had something he didn't single quotes T. Patience. Determination. And a memory trained from 4 years of academic detail. Every night, I wrote 2 things, my thesis, and notes about Jake. What accounts he used. Who his followers were. What shady jokes he made on camera. Where he stored his saved streams. And eventually, I found something. Something he definitely wouldn't want our parents or his tiny little fan base to see. An entire folder of saved clips from his private Discord chats. Some of them were harmless. Some were not insults, slurs, dares, even footage of him prank calling people live, pretending to be someone else. Some were borderline criminal, and he had shared them with his closest friends, laughing about them in voice chats. That was my leverage. I copied everything onto a flash drive, and I saved it like it was a precious diamond. Meanwhile, I kept rebuilding my thesis. I stopped sleeping. My eyes were bloodshot. I missed calls from my friends. I ignored group chats. No one knew what was happening. I didn't tell anyone, because this wasn't a sob story anymore. It was a mission. By the 5th day, my body was running on fumes. But my thesis was nearly complete again. It wasn't perfect. It would never be what it had been. But it was strong. It was enough. I knew I would submit it just in time. But I wasn't done yet, because Jake still thought he had gotten away with it. He still walked around the house smirking. He still threw wrappers on the floor and waited for Mom to clean up after him. He still made fun of me under his breath. But soon, very soon, he was going to learn something. You don't mess with someone who's already lost everything, because they've got nothing left to fear. I submitted my thesis on a Thursday morning. 6 minutes before the online submission portal closed. I didn't feel triumph. I didn't even feel relief. Just a numb sort of emptiness, the kind that creeps in after a long storm. when everything is still standing. But nothing feels the same. The old laptop wheezed and clicked as it processed my final upload, almost like it was congratulating itself for surviving the week. I stared at the confirmation screen for a long time, rereading my own name printed on the page. Then I shut the laptop. And I stood up. I walked to the bathroom mirror and looked at myself. My face was pale, eyes bloodshot, lips cracked. My hands were still trembling, not from stress anymore, but from the energy that was building inside me. Because now that the deadline was over, it was time for my real plan to begin. I hadn't rushed it. Every night over the last 6 days, while I retyped research citations and reworded analysis paragraphs, I had been gathering proof. Carefully, quietly, like a shadow in my own home. Jake never suspected a thing. And that was the most insulting part. He still thought I was weak. He still thought I was the kind of person who would cry and move on, who would forgive without ever being asked, who would just take the blow and carry on with quiet grace. He had no idea what kind of girl I had become. I had found everything I needed. His files, his chats, the screen recordings, the messages to his followers, some of which were borderline illegal. He had been using our parents' credit card to buy games and digital upgrades, hiding the receipts in an unused folder. I had screenshots, dates, times, logins, everything, and I knew where to send them. I didn't want to destroy his life. That would have made me like him. I just wanted balance. I wanted him to feel, for once, what it was like to have something you cared about unravel in your hands. So I crafted a plan. It started with an email. A private, anonymous message to the principal of his former college. The one he had dropped out of 2 semesters ago, but still pretended to be part of, just for clout. I attached some of the more offensive clips, enough to make them take a closer look. Then I created a burner Instagram account just for insurance and uploaded a few screenshots to it. No captions, no tags, just evidence. I knew Jake's followers would find it eventually. That was enough. Finally, I printed out the credit card charges, highlighted them, and slipped them into my mom's purse one night when she was distracted watching a drama series. That was all I did. I didn't need to scream. I didn't need to point fingers. All I needed was a quiet spark. I let the fire spread on its own. It took exactly 4 days. The first crack came on a Sunday morning. I was in my room pretending to sleep when I heard Mom yelling. Her voice cut through the hallway like a siren. "Jake, did you buy $300 worth of games last month?" There was a pause, and then the familiar sound of scrambling footsteps. "What? No, that must be someone else." "Don't lie to me, Jake. I called the bank. These charges came from your login, your account. This is our money." I smiled to myself, not because I enjoyed the chaos, but because for once it wasn't aimed at me. Later that day, the principal of his college called the house. Dad answered. The conversation was short, sharp, and ended with Dad calling Jake into the room with a tone I hadn't heard in years. "What the hell were you doing, Jake? Posting that crap online? Do you know what they said? You've been impersonating a student on their behalf for months. You're lucky they're not pressing charges," Jake protested. Swore it wasn't him. Said his account was hacked. Blamed his friends. But it was too late. His digital kingdom crumbled like a sandcastle in a storm. One by one, his subscribers started disappearing. I knew because he started sulking around the house like a ghost, his phone glued to his hand, furiously typing, checking, refreshing. The gaming setup went dark. The neon lights stopped glowing. He stopped streaming altogether. And the silence? It was beautiful. For the first time, he avoided me. He couldn't look me in the eye. I didn't gloat. I didn't rub it in. Because this wasn't about humiliation, it was about proving something to him, to my parents, to myself, that I wasn't invisible, that I wasn't weak, that I had power, even if they couldn't see it. Especially because they couldn't see it. 3 days later, my professor emailed me back. He had read my thesis and was deeply impressed by the resilience and originality of my analysis. He attached a recommendation letter, a glowing one, the kind that could change everything. That evening, I printed it out and left it on the dinner table. I didn't say anything, but when my mom picked it up and read it, her lips parted in shock. This is really good," she said slowly, looking at me for the first time like she was seeing something new. I just nodded and took a bite of my food. My dad cleared his throat and muttered, "Well done, Aisha." "And Jake?" He looked down at his plate. Silent, defeated, almost, human. It wasn't revenge in the dramatic sense. There were no screaming matches, no furniture flying, no final monologues, but it was justice. It was quiet, strategic, fair, and most importantly, it was mine. Asterisk. After that week, everything changed. Not suddenly, not like a lightning strike, but gradually, like the shifting of seasons. Quiet at first, barely noticeable. But once it started, it didn't stop. I could feel it in the way my parents looked at me during meals. There was a new slowness in their gaze, a hesitation, as if they were trying to calculate how they had missed something. For the first time in years, they asked me questions beyond the usual "how's school?" Surface chatter. Mom started knocking on my door before entering. Dad offered to proofread one of my scholarship essays, even though I didn't need help. Weren't perfect. They still gravitated toward Jake. Habit is a powerful thing. That they had seen what I could do. And they were, I think, a little shaken by it. Jake, on the other hand, was broken in a way I hadn't expected. He didn't just lose subscribers. He lost confidence. The guy who once bragged about getting a brand deal with a gaming chair company now flinched when the doorbell rang, terrified someone else might find out what he had posted. He stayed in his room mostly. Lights off. Gaming setup abandoned. Even the bright RGB colors that once screamed through the walls had dimmed to a soft blue glow, like the last breath of a dying star. And I kept moving forward. I applied for 3 international graduate programs. 1 in Canada, 1 in the Netherlands, 1 in Japan. Each application took hours. Essays, letters, scanned certificates, and I poured myself into each one like I was painting my escape route. Because even though the storm had passed, I didn't want to stay in that house forever. Forgiveness doesn't always mean returning to where you were. Sometimes it just means choosing peace, even if it's somewhere else. But it wasn't over. Not yet. 2 weeks after I submitted the last of my applications, something unexpected happened. Jake knocked on my door. It was late past midnight. I was sitting at my desk editing a portfolio for a fellowship application. At first, I thought I had imagined it. He never knocked, but there it was again. A soft, uncertain tap. I opened the door and saw him standing there, barefoot, eyes red, hands stuffed in the pockets of his hoodie. He didn't say anything right away, just stared at the floor like he was hoping it would speak for him. "What?" I asked, not angry, just tired. He looked up at me. His voice was hoarse. "I'm sorry." I blinked. It wasn't the first time I had imagined hearing that, but it was the first time it was real. "For what?" I asked carefully. He swallowed. "The laptop. The thesis. Everything. I was a jerk. I know that now. I folded my arms. You didn't just smash a machine, Jake. You almost sabotaged my entire degree. I know, he whispered. I wasn't thinking. I was just mad. You always seemed so perfect. Like you didn't care about anything but school. Like you didn't notice how everyone treated me like a failure. I let out a sharp breath. Do you hear yourself? You were jealous of me while Mom and Dad were worshipping you and ignoring me. He shook his head slowly. I didn't see it like that. Of course you didn't, I said. You never had to. He stayed quiet. And then, barely audible, he said, but I see it now. Something in me softened, not much, but enough to keep me from slamming the door in his face. I wasn't sure if he meant it. I wasn't sure if he would change. But I did know he wasn't the invincible boy he used to be. And that, maybe, was enough. I nodded once. Okay. He didn't ask for anything else. He just left. I stood there for a while, alone again, and it was strange. Because for the first time since everything happened, I didn't feel like the house was suffocating me. I felt like I had won, not because I hurt anyone, but because I had survived them, because I had saved myself. Weeks passed. The seasons shifted again. One morning, I opened my email and saw the subject line that made me freeze. Congratulations, Aisha, you've been accepted. It was from the Netherlands program, my top choice. Not only had I been accepted, I'd been awarded a full scholarship, tuition, housing, travel, everything. I stared at the screen, my mouth open, heart racing. And for the first time in months, I let out a laugh. Not bitter, not dry, a real laugh. I printed the letter and pinned it to my wall like a victory flag. Then I walked to the living room, where my parents were having tea. I handed the letter to them without a word. Mom read it first. Her hands trembled slightly. Then Dad. He blinked twice, eyebrows slowly rising. There was silence. Not awkward, just heavy. Finally, Mom looked up at me. We're proud of you, she said. I gave a small nod. Thanks. There were no tears, no long hugs. That wasn't how my family worked, but it was something. Later that evening, I packed the old laptop in a box and slid it under my bed. I didn't need it anymore. It had served its purpose. It had reminded me who I was and what I was capable of. I was leaving in 3 months. And this time, I wasn't running away. I was walking towards something better. Asterisk, asterisk. The 3 months between my acceptance and my flight felt unreal. Like I was living in a limbo space, a hallway between two versions of myself, the one who had been broken and the one who had survived. I used the time to prepare, to plan, to breathe. People at school started noticing me more. Professors congratulated. Me. Some juniors messaged asking for tips on thesis writing. One of them even said, "You're kind of a legend, you know that?" I didn't feel like a legend. I still had circles under my eyes. I still carried the weight of months of silence, anger and stress. But I smiled and thanked her. At home. The atmosphere had shifted permanently. It wasn't warm. Let's not pretend my family suddenly became perfect. That there was respect in the air now. A fragile kind, like a vase that had cracked once and was now held together by glue and caution. Mum started asking how she could help with my packing. My dad printed out lists from travel blogs, things international students should know. Jake kept his distance, but sometimes I'd catch him glancing at me with something that almost looked like guilt. Maybe even admiration. We never talked again about the laptop or the revenge. Some things don't need to be spoken aloud to be understood. There was one day, though, that stood out. It was 2 weeks before I left. A Sunday afternoon. I was sitting on the front steps, drinking cold tea, and reading an article about Dutch student life, when Jake came outside. He sat down beside me. Not too close. We watched the cars pass for a while. Then he said, "Do you think I'll ever figure out what I'm good at?" I looked at him, surprised by the question. "I don't know," I said honestly. "But not if you keep blaming everyone else." He nodded slowly. That was all. But it felt important. Maybe he really was changing. Or maybe he was just tired of being empty. Either way, I hoped he found his answer. The night before my flight, I stayed up late packing. My mom brought in extra luggage tags. My dad checked the weight of each suitcase twice. Jake didn't say much, but he handed me his old travel adapter before I left. Didn't even look me in the eye. Just mumbled, "You'll probably need this." And you know what? I took it, because forgiveness at its core isn't about pretending it didn't happen. No, it's about accepting that it did, and choosing to let it stay behind you instead of dragging it with you. When we got to the airport, the next morning, my parents hugged me tight. Not the stiff, one-arm side hugs I was used to, but real ones. Long, quiet, emotional. Jake stayed in the car. Didn't blame him. I boarded my flight with a heart full of silence and peace. The seat beside me was empty. And I opened my laptop, yes. A new one, bought with part of the scholarship funds. And I smiled when the screen lit up. Blank document. Fresh page. It felt like freedom. As the plane took off, I looked out the window and thought about everything I'd survived. Not just the smashed laptop, but years of being overlooked. Underestimated. Pushed aside. It's funny how sometimes the people closest to you can make you feel the smallest, but also how rising from their shadows can turn you into something stronger than they ever imagined. Didn't just write a thesis. I wrote my way out. And now, I was writing a new chapter. One where I was no longer just the quiet girl in the corner. Where I was heard. Seen. Respected. And maybe, someday, even loved in the right way. Asterisk. When I landed in the Netherlands, the first thing that hit me was the cold. It wasn't just the weather. It was the crispness of the air. The quiet order of the airport. The unfamiliarity of everything around me. I stood in the arrivals hall gripping my suitcase, like it was the only anchor I had left. And in a way, it was. But I didn't feel afraid. I felt clean. Like the weight of everything I had carried for years was still at the terminal, waiting to board someone else's plane. The university had sent a student volunteer to pick me up. Her name was Noura, and she had the easy confidence of someone who belonged. She wore a scarf around her head, stylish boots, and a warm smile. "You must be Aisha," she said, her voice kind. I nodded. "I guess I must." She laughed. "Welcome to your new life." It sounded cheesy, but when she said it, I believed it. The student dorm they assigned me wasn't glamorous. Small room, shared kitchen, a radiator that only worked half the time. But it was mine. My space, my key, my door. The first night, I lay awake in the dark, listening to the unfamiliar sounds outside. Bikes clicking past, voices in Dutch, the distant ringing of a tram bell. And I smiled. Because this time, I wasn't listening for footsteps in the hallway. I wasn't bracing for someone to burst into my room and demand something. I wasn't invisible here. I was just Oisha, no expectations, no comparison, just me. University life was hard at first. The lectures were faster. The culture more direct. Everyone seemed to know what they were doing while I was still learning. which buses to take and how to order coffee without sounding like I was apologizing for existing. But every day, I got better. I joined a research club. I made 2 friends from my course, Lena from Tunisia and Sophie from Germany. They were brilliant and funny and didn't ask me about my family once. We talked about books, feminism, migration theory, and sometimes nothing at all. It was the first time in my life I felt like I was allowed to take up space. I started walking to class with my headphones in, music playing songs I used to hide from my brother for fear he'd mock them. I wore the scarf colors I liked without worrying if someone would make a comment. I took selfies and posted them without hesitation. Because now, no one was looking over my shoulder. I was living a life of my own making. And yet, there were moments when the past still tapped me on the shoulder. One evening, about a month into the semester, I got an email from my mom. Just one line. "Hope you're well. Your brother asked about you." That was it. No follow-up. No apology. No updates. But it stayed with me. I didn't know what he wanted, or whether he truly understood what he had done. But part of me hoped he did. Sometimes healing isn't about reconciliation. Sometimes it's just about being seen, even if it's from a distance. I didn't reply to the email. Not yet. A few weeks later, I gave a presentation in class. A major one. 20 minutes long, on refugee integration policies. My professor praised me in front of everyone. That night, I walked back to my dorm with my coat zipped tight, wind in my face, and a joy in my chest that didn't depend on anyone else. I made tea. I opened my laptop, and I wrote a short email. "Hi, I'm doing well. Tell him I said hi." I hit send. That was enough. No bridges rebuilt. Just a signal. A light. I wasn't bitter anymore, because bitterness binds you to what broke you. I had let go. I had let it all go. Not for them. For me. Asterisk. Months passed. The trees outside my dorm window changed color, then shed their leaves. Winter came slowly to the city, gentle at first. Then all at once, with every layer of snow that settled on the rooftops, I felt lighter. My world had become quieter, but it wasn't empty. It was full of new rhythms, new rituals. Early morning classes with steaming cups of coffee. Long nights of discussion in the common room with other international students. A part-time job at the library, where I learned to say sorry in 4 different languages just by watching people's eyes. And somewhere in the middle of it all, I began to feel something unfamiliar. Pride. Not the kind that comes from awards or praise, though I had earned some, but the kind that blooms when you know how far you've come, when you remember where you started and realize you built this. You did this. No one handed it to you. One evening, I was sitting in the university cafe with Lena and Sophie. We were talking about love. The kind we'd seen. The kind we'd wanted. The kind we feared. It was one of those rare, soul-deep conversations that happens only when people are halfway between exhausted and honest. Sophie said, "I think I spent so much time trying to impress my family, I forgot what I actually wanted." And Lena laughed softly. "Girl, I feel that in my bones." Then they turned to me. "What about you, Aisha?" I paused. Then I said, "I used to think that if I worked hard enough, maybe the people I loved would finally see me. But now, I work hard so I can see myself." They stared at me for a moment. Then Lena raised her glass of tea. "To seeing ourselves." We clinked our mugs together. It sounds simple now, but that moment was a turning point. Because I realized something else that night. The person I used to be, the one who walked on eggshells, who held her breath when her brother laughed too loudly, who waited for her parents' approval like it was oxygen, she wasn't here anymore. She hadn't flown with me. She stayed behind in that house, in that bedroom full of cracked keys and swallowed words. And what remained was someone stronger, someone freer, someone who didn't just survive, she remade herself. Around that time, I started a blog. It wasn't for followers or fame, just a place to write about things I cared about. Education, mental health, what it means to grow up unseen, what it means to reclaim yourself. I wrote anonymously at first. Then I signed my name, and to my surprise, people responded. Messages trickled in. Strangers, students, women who said, I thought I was the only one. One message in particular stayed with me. A girl wrote, My brother broke my violin once when I was 17. My parents laughed too. I never played again. That your story made me want to pick it up again. Thank you. I stared at her message for a long time. Then I cried. Not out of pain, but out of release. Because sometimes healing doesn't happen in one big dramatic moment. It happens quietly, in the calm after the storm, in the eyes of someone who says, me too. I started smiling more after that. Not because my life was perfect, but because I was no longer pretending. And the more honest I was with myself, with others, the more doors opened. One of my professors nominated me for a research ASSISTANTSHIP. It came with a stipend and an opportunity to co-author a paper. When I told my parents during our monthly call, my mom looked stunned for a moment. Then, she said, we always knew you were smart. We just didn't realize how much you were holding inside. It wasn't an apology, but it was a start. And Jake? We still didn't talk often, but every now and then, I'd get a text. Short ones. Saw your blog. You're good at this. Mum made biryani. She misses you. I'm thinking of enrolling in a course. No idea what yet, but just thought I'd tell you. I replied when I felt like it. I didn't owe him anything. I was glad he was trying. Because people don't stay frozen in time. They grow. They mess up. They hurt others. But they can also learn. Unlearn. Begin again. Just like I did. ***, spring arrived quietly in the Netherlands. Not with a grand announcement, but with subtle changes, the light lasting longer in the evening, tulips blooming like sudden smiles, the chill lifting from the wind. And in me, something else began to thaw. I was almost a year into my new life. My research assistantship had been extended. My blog now had a modest following, people who checked in, commented, shared their stories with me. I had found a rhythm, a home, but there was one thing I hadn't done yet. I hadn't gone back, not even for a visit. At first, I told myself I was too busy, that travel was expensive, that I had deadlines, but deep down, I knew it wasn't any of that. I was afraid, not of seeing my parents, not even of Jake. I was afraid of losing the version of myself I'd fought so hard to build. But healing isn't always about staying away. Sometimes, it's about walking back into the places that once hurt you and realizing they don't have the power to break you anymore. So when summer break rolled around, I booked a flight home. 1 month. Just enough to see everyone. To show up not as the old Aisha, but the one I had become. The airport looked the same. So did the roads. The noise, the humidity, the rhythm of my city. It all hit me like a memory I didn't know I missed. Then, there was home. Same gate. Same front door. But somehow, smaller. When I stepped inside, my mom hugged me tighter than I expected. My dad took my bags without a word, but he didn't complain. And Jake? He stood at the hallway entrance, awkward and unsure, then gave a small wave. Hey, he said. Hey, I replied. That was it. Dinner that night felt surreal. Everyone kept glancing at me like I might float away if they blinked. Mum asked about the weather in Europe. Dad asked if Dutch people really ate cheese with every meal. Jake said nothing. But I noticed the difference. The house had changed. Not just physically though, there was a new rug, and Jake had finally taken down his neon gaming lights, but emotionally. It didn't hum with tension like it used to. I asked Jake once, later that week, why he stopped streaming. He shrugged. I needed time to think. I wanted to try doing something that doesn't just revolve around shouting into the void. What are you doing now? He smiled, a little sheepish. Working at a community center, teaching kids tech basics, coding, stuff like that. Seriously? Yeah, it's kind of nice. They actually listen to me. That surprised me more than anything. Not because I didn't think he was capable, but because he finally wanted to do something that wasn't just about himself. Later that night, I walked past his room. The door was open. And there, taped to his wall, was a printed copy of one of my blog posts. What happens when you're the quiet one in a loud family? I stared at it for a long time. Then I walked back to my room. The room I grew up in. The one that once felt like a cage. Now it just felt small. Like it no longer fit who I was. I opened my laptop, wrote a new post. Returning home doesn't mean going backwards. It was about facing your old world with your new self intact. It went viral within a week. Hundreds of comments. People telling me they finally understood why they felt so lost every time they returned home after growing. I didn't write it for likes or validation. I wrote it because I finally understood something. We outgrow more than clothes and cities. We outgrow the roles we were forced into, the silence we were taught to swallow, the stories we were told about who we are and what we deserve. And sometimes, we rewrite them. I stayed for 2 more weeks. Visited my old high school. Had tea with an old friend. Spent time with my mom while she cooked, and even helped Jake organize a coding workshop at the center. It didn't erase the past, but it reminded me that people can surprise you. On the day I left, Jake walked me to the car. We stood awkwardly beside the trunk while my dad loaded my suitcase. Jake looked down, then said, "You're kind of badass, you know that?" I laughed. "Took you long enough to figure that out." He smirked. "Thanks for not completely destroying me." "I did consider it," I teased. But I needed my karma clean. We stood there for another moment. Then he reached into his hoodie pocket and handed me something. A flash drive. The one I destroyed. I thought I lost it, but it was wedged behind the dresser this whole time. I didn't know if it still worked. But maybe you want it, even if it's just as a reminder. I stared at it. The tiny silver object that once held 5 months of my blood, sweat, and tears. I took it not because I needed it, but because I'd already rewritten the ending. Now, it was just part of the story. Asterisk. I returned to the Netherlands with a different kind of peace inside me. Not the peace of resolution, but the peace of clarity. I didn't need to win every battle. I didn't need everyone to understand. And I didn't need to carry the past with me like a curse. What I needed was to keep going. That fall, I began a new research project with one of the professors who had read my blog and invited me to collaborate. It was on family systems and trauma resilience among first-generation daughters. Something I knew far too well. It was surreal. Writing academically about the very structure that once made me feel invisible. But the best part? This time, I wasn't just surviving the story. I was studying it, reframing it, owning it. Around that same time, my blog started gaining more attention. Not viral, not influencer level, but enough that people began reaching out. Students, teachers, NGOs, even a small publisher who said, "If you ever want to write a memoir, let's talk." I laughed when I read that email. Me? A memoir? But the truth is, maybe I was already writing one, piece by piece. Every blog post, every lecture, every moment I chose to speak up when I used to stay silent. Legacy, I learned, isn't always loud. It isn't always statues or headlines or shiny plaques. Sometimes legacy is the quiet email from a girl you've never met who says, "Because of you, I stood up to my brother." Sometimes it's a mother who tells you your article helped her see her daughter differently. Sometimes it's your old self whispering, "You made it," while you're walking home in the rain with your backpack soaked and your heart full. And sometimes it's just knowing that you are not who they said you were. You are more. You always were. You just needed time and space to remember it. That winter, I bought myself a gift. A new laptop. Not flashy. Not expensive. But engraved. Just 2 words, etched in small silver font near the corner of the lid. I remember. Not to hold on to the pain, but to remember the girl who stayed up all night retyping her thesis from memory. The girl who kept going when no one clapped. The girl who rewrote her story, even when no one wanted to hear it. I remembered her. I promised never to become the kind of woman who'd silence her again. Asterisk. I graduated on a rainy Thursday. Not with balloons or screaming relatives in the crowd. Just me, in a pressed blazer, walking across the stage with my name echoing through the ceremony hall. Aisha Rahman. First in my program. My advisor handed me my diploma and whispered, "You're one of the most resilient students I've ever met." I nodded and smiled, but inside, I wanted to cry. Not because of the honor, but because I had done it. After everything. After the broken laptop, the laughter, the betrayal, the lonely nights, the doubts that wrapped around my throat like vines, I had made it here. Not just alive, but whole. When I walked out of the auditorium, the rain had turned into mist. Gentle, soft, forgiving. I took a picture holding my diploma. No makeup, no filters, just joy. And I posted it with the caption, "For the girl who stayed up all night, retyping everything from scratch. She didn't just finish. She won." It went viral. Again. Thousands of people shared it. Thousands more wrote to me. But the most unexpected message came from someone I never imagined. Jake, I'm proud of you. I really am. Also, I'm applying to school again. You inspired me. I'm not asking you to forget. Just know I finally understand. And I'm trying. Thanks for not erasing me from your story. I stared at the message. Then I typed back slowly. Good. Keep writing your own. And this time don't smash the keyboard. He sent back a laughing emoji. And then just one word, promise. I didn't need more than that. Because growth doesn't always look like hugs and reunions. Sometimes it looks like 2 people, once broken by the same house, finally speaking to each other as human beings, not rivals, not victims, not villains. Just people. A year later, my memoir was published. Not a long one. Not fancy. But real. It was called The Quiet One. A story of family, fire, and finding my voice. And in the dedication I wrote, to every girl who was told to keep quiet, to every thesis retyped in tears, to the ones who are still rewriting their stories, I see you. I was you. Keep going. Now I teach. I teach storytelling and trauma, writing to girls in community centers, online forums, and sometimes even refugee camps. Places where silence once reigned, now filled with pens scratching across paper, fingers tapping keys, eyes shining with release. And every time one of them says, I don't think I have anything important to say. I look them right in the eye and tell them. Neither did I until I said it anyway. Because that's the thing they don't tell you about power. It doesn't always come with noise. Sometimes it comes with stillness, with knowing, with surviving and choosing to speak anyway. And when I look back not just at the night Jake smashed, my laptop, the thousand small moments after, the silence, the strength, the revenge that turned into redemption, the broken family slowly learning how to see each other again. I don't see a tragedy anymore. I see a beginning. A girl, at rock bottom, and a woman who climbed all the way out, one word at a time. And no one, not Jake, not my parents, not the world, can take that story away from me. Because I wrote it. I lived it. And I'll keep writing. Asterisk, asterisk, thanks for watching. Hoped you liked it. If you watched till the end, please comment revenge so that we could understand you were with us till the end. As well as, please let us know, where are you watching from? Before leaving, please hit the subscribe button, comment your thought, and share with your nearest and dearest one. See you in the next one. Until to the next one, stay happy. Asterisk, asterisk.